Hello everyone, this is Colin once again. This might seem like a random video. I don't even know why I'm making this video. I usually don't make politically oriented videos or political videos. I think the only other time I've made a political video was when I read the article about the macro-nationalists and commented about Anders Breivik, the Norwegian domestic terrorist. But this video is about American, usually evangelical Christians, and their comments about the history of the United States, the Founding Fathers specifically, and the role that religion plays in the United States. Now, this has been a topic that has been debated by a whole bunch of people. People who are better qualified to understand the subject than myself. But I subscribe to Right Wing Watch, the channel here on YouTube, and a lot of the videos recently have been conservatives essentially talking about how they think the United States is a Christian nation exclusively, or was founded as a Christian nation, and how the Constitution of the United States is pretty much like a biblical document, or that it's is like riddled with biblical verses or alluding to biblical verses, and that somehow means that the foundation of the country is Judeo-Christian tradition, etc. And while I'll agree that the majority, I would argue, of the founding fathers, the ones that we don't hear about very often, were Christian. They were Christians fleeing religious persecution, and this idea that they did not want a government that essentially was ruled by a king, that was pretty much this concept of a divine king, which was really the style of government in Europe during that time. They wanted, in effect, a separation of church and state. What I find is really fascinating is how so many people in the United States seem to have missed that message, this idea of separation of church and state. It's not to say that religious people can't be involved with politics. We know that to be president, you have to at least belong to some sort of Christian denomination to even be considered for election. And I think we've made progress with that, because we've had a Catholic president. And then we if Mitt Romney wins, we'll have a Mormon. But point is that religion, of course, religious people play a role and have played a role in the progression of the politics of the country, the history of the country. However, the way that some of these modern conservatives talk, it makes it sound like we live in a damn theocracy. I watched a video by Right Wing Watch. They had a video where a guy, or a woman, was saying something like that, if you make man-made laws that aren't backed by the Bible, then those laws are basically BS. And that just is amazing to me, considering the plurality that we have here in the United States, the multiculturalism, the concept founded by the founders, this idea that any religion, there is no state religion. All religions can flourish here. All religious-minded individuals from different backgrounds can flourish here. People like Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Paine said something to that effect. And yet, we have not only this antagonism towards non-Christian religions. I mean, I remember I saw a video here on YouTube where like a Hindu chaplain was going to say a prayer, which, I mean, I don't know how all of you think about having prayers being done, like, in the Senate Hall or the House of Representatives. But anyway, I know that I think James Madison was totally against that, and I think James Madison actually might have been against having chaplains in the military. But anyway, point is that they, this Hindu, you can see this video on YouTube, you can just, search for it on here. Hindu gets booed by, senators. He starts to do his prayer, and then, like, you hear these couple voices of these senators, like, yelling, "There's only one true God," and, this is blasphemy, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you're not in a freaking church. You're in a secular building that has, various representatives of various religious backgrounds, and you're in a country that has people of different backgrounds. So where do these senators or representatives get off saying this sort of crap? Another thing that's been brought up is, it's like the Supreme Court. There's like, in the Supreme Court, there are images of various lawgivers, one of which is Muhammad. And yet you have these idiots saying all this negative stuff about, all Muslims are suspect. It's like, at one point, obviously, someone bothered to include the Prophet of Islam in the rotunda of the Supreme Court building. But anyway, I'm getting off course here. I digress. The point is that we have a history in this country of not only religious tolerance and pluralism, but this understanding that this country is a far cry from being a, quote, Christian nation. Another thing that I'm always shocked when I hear these conservatives talking is when they describe the fact that they want to follow biblical law, I'm confused as to why they're living in a country that is based on this premise of secularism and separation of church and state. They will cite that the framers of the Constitution and that many of the founding fathers were Christian. This is true. However, when you look at the quotations of a number of these individuals that were Christian, and as a side note, and we're all aware of this by now, there were many founding fathers that were skeptics, that were deists, and did not say a lot of positive things about organized religion in the context of it having political power within a society. But you've got individuals like John Adams, who was a Christian, and yet when you look at the quotations that John Adams says about organized religion in the context of being married to the political process, he says nothing but negative things about that. So I do agree with the conservatives on one point where we should recognize that the majority, I would think, of the founding fathers, from my understanding, were Christians, were members of Protestant, Orthodox, Protestant sects and denominations, and this does need to be recognized. Having said that, you have individuals like John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, who some people have argued was a deist, but even if he wasn't, Jefferson, of course, made his own Bible and took out all the supernatural elements, took out all the miraculous elements, just wanted to boil the whole thing down to the words that Jesus spoke, and he didn't really want to get into the miracles and other supernatural concepts. So you have people like Jefferson and Adams who, appear to be Christians, and yet I would argue that the vast majority of conservative evangelical Christians, and perhaps even just conservative Christians of other of actual denominations, not non-denominational, would be horrified by the words spoken by a number of these founding fathers that were in fact Christians. Now, some people could argue, oh, well, that was only John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and all these deist founding fathers, but we have this rich history of founding fathers that were actual, Orthodox-minded Christians. Okay, that's great. Then I would challenge these same conservatives who say that to produce one quotation from one of these other founders that we don't hear very much about. They're not the big names, right? I would like them to produce a statement by one of these founders that actually shares any commonalities with the arguments and political talking points that most evangelical conservatives say right now during discourses in the country right now. Because when I read the vast majority of quotations by by Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, James Madison, who was called the father of the Constitution, their statements about organized religion and politics does not really jive with the talking points made by conservative evangelical Christians here in the United States, who talk about the glory days of the United States and how, all these, how religion, in politics was such a huge thing, that Christianity, the Judeo-Christian values of this country is what makes this country a great thing. I just don't see that anywhere. And I don't think it's uncommon for conservative individuals to have this myth. I believe it's a psychological thing. I'm really convinced of it right now. Where they project their values onto the past. And they talk about this golden age or these glory days of the past and how we can just go back to the way that used to be we'd all be well and good. But the irony about saying stuff like that and believing that is that, one, I dare say you don't really find a lot of evidence to support that back then was how you view back then as being. In fact, as I've just stated, you find countless quotations by the leaders of the Founding Fathers, George Washington, Thomas Paine, Benjamin Franklin, saying the opposite of what the conservative Christians say about the history of the country. Or you just don't find evidence to support their position as far as using history. So what you then have to think about is whether we are experiencing individuals that are committing revisionist history. And indeed, that has been a charge that has been leveled against them, that they are revisionists when it comes to history. But they're not alone. This is something that we've seen in all countries with many conservative groups that harken back to the so-called golden age when things used to be better. I think when they say stuff like that, I just don't see the evidence supporting their myth. I really don't see it. But this is something that can get really complex, because you could have one individual write a letter to somebody, and Thomas Jefferson could have written a letter to person X saying one thing, and then he wrote a letter to person Y saying something else. So sometimes people can pull up contradictory statements and say, well, this is the Thomas Jefferson that supports my views, and this is the Thomas Jefferson that supports my views, as an example. So because I haven't studied enough of this, I don't have the full picture as far as being able to... I'm not a historian, so I can't make a huge argument. I really don't know. I guess this is just a rant. But I want to know what you think. I want to know what all of you think as far as, do you buy this whole Christian nation scenario, and that this country is founded on Judeo-Christian values, and do you buy what the conservatives say when they're debating social points or domestic points such as abortion or gay marriage or things like that, and then they start invoking their religious views towards something that has to do with individuals that may not even share their own religious tradition? Because I find that basically, are they correct in doing that? Are they correct in using history to support their views, the history of the United States? And when they champion the Founding Fathers, even the more obscure ones, we don't even know their names off the top of our heads from school, and they would argue that's because they were Orthodox Christians. Do those Orthodox Christian Founding Fathers did they ever argue points and have the same attitude that the modern conservative Christians have today? Do you believe that? And then I would also try to point out or ask the question, when these evangelicals are talking about politics in the context of more of a theocratic mindset, like, when they start invoking God and the Bible specifically, the Trinitarian God of Christianity, for those of you out there that are Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, anything that's, skeptic, atheist, agnostic, deist, that are not Christian, how does that make you feel about people like that? And when they start invoking the Bible, have you have a hard time relating to that? Seeing God we trust on our money. Just things to think about. Thank you very much for watching. This has just sort of been a rant and some observations once again. I enjoy your feedback, and I'm not really trying to prove anything. I'm just trying to ask questions. Thank you for watching. Peace.